wise and like, okay, we have to talk to other people. Well, the parents, you get an email from the parents or something that this happened in class. They're just going off of what their kid said. It's the first thing. So let's go through some scenarios. This is not like I know the answer to everything. This is, we can workshop it. What do you guys do? How would you do it in your school? It's great having Ben here because he can really set the tone and maybe answer ways better than I can. But here's how we play. You get to pick a scenario, and then you get to ask someone else to answer it. So you get to say, I would like this person to answer this scenario. You want to start us off first? Go ahead. Pick a scenario you would like. Okay, just take a minute to read through them. We can probably get through a decent amount of them.
9 and Brittany.
Oh, it put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Stop here.
Number 9.
Number 9. Liz tells you she can't work with Shakira in class and asks you not to seat them together or make them partners. What do you do?
Is this scenario, does she come to you privately or say that?
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Then I would probably just ask why and ask for more details about what's going on.
Yeah.
If it's privately, then I would probably give her the benefit of the doubt. But I would, if it's legit, if she has like legitimate concerns, I would do it. And
What would be a legit reason?
If like Liz is a really good student and Shakira is a copier and a manager, and then I would say, oh yeah, that's good. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, but then you got to pull on that other thread too, right? Because then they're like, all of a sudden you figured out you have a copier in your classroom.
Well, yeah, I mean, the way I run my classes, a lot of the book work isn't like it can work together, So it's not like I wouldn't call it cheating necessarily.
Okay, so it's not like a test copying. It's more like one person is doing all the thinking.
Yeah,
the other person is
doing all the work, and the other one's like, "What did you get for that? What did you get for that? What did you get for that?" So if she says something like that, I would definitely just have them sit apart, and then I'd probably have Shakira sit with someone else who's also not a good student, so I can see if they make them work.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, one downside to that, though, would be you'd have 2 poor performing students never having an example of good work. So there's always caveats, but
Ben, at least in our school, it's like everybody in upper school has been here long enough to know basic expectations.
yeah.
And
right.
so
That's
most of
nice.
the time kids are doing poorly. There's kids that work hard and get B's, but there's no one that like works crazy hard and gets C's.
Yeah.
So I would probably say, yeah, you both need to work. You both need to work harder. You're both lazy, so let's put you with someone else who's lazy, and then someone's got to actually take up the slack.
Nice. Can you think of an example where you wouldn't separate them?
My friend told me that she texted her last night and says she might be mad at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is a great opportunity for you to work together.
Right, that's great. We had a student on the spectrum of autism and did not have personal interaction skills. And so she would actually end up like touching the hair of another girl and pulling on it. And so we had to like say, I think this was in like the 7th grade. So the kids don't have a whole lot of life experience of like interacting. So it's like, look, normally you don't have to ask another student not to touch your hair. Her brain works different. She doesn't have these filters that you have. So in this time, it's a kindness to go up and say, hey, please don't play with my hair right now. Or like, I would have to work with a student and say, okay, can you take 2 steps backwards? Because they'd come up like way too close for a conversation, but they don't know. And the student that had autism was very thankful for it because they didn't know. They're like, I would help her end the conversation. Like, okay, thanks. It was nice seeing you. Can you go sit down now? Oh, okay, thanks. And would go off. Now it could get to the point where nobody wants to sit with the person that has to be told something extra. So we wanted our kids to learn how to bear that burden, right, and how to interact with people that are different than them. Um, but that was complicated, and it shouldn't be like you always have to sit by that person. So it's like you always have the burden in class,
And
the
they can
burden in
take
class. So that's how quickly it can get kind of complicated. So that's why we kind of put in this scenario. We don't really like that. So now you get to pick a scenario and someone else to answer.
Julia. I really want to ask Caitlin this one, but I just want to give it back to her because she picked me first. Ask Julia. 17. This never happens
This
at our
is the one I
school.
was like, yeah, when he was age, he makes a job. I was out of the class, asked her why she did, and if it was like she's actually being racist, then I'd be like, let's not do that at our school. We don't allow it. And then take it back in. If she makes it again, then
But what
I'd
if they're
probably
like, but
understand
I'm
that.
Asian?
I would say we still don't allow that at our school. We don't talk that about other cultures or your culture.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. So what would be a type of comment that might raise to that level that you would think would be inappropriate joking?
So many things.
Yeah, probably nothing. Just like, well, okay. First, I would be like, what is the definition of racism? Like, is it actually being inappropriate to the, to the other race? Like, an example of inappropriateness would probably be like, I don't know, their eyes like squint weird or something like that. That's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yes, there are differences, but those differences aren't bad, and we should mention them.
Yeah. I like that. We had so this is interesting. So we had an Asian student and a white student and arguing over whether you button polos up 2 buttons or 1 button. Right? It's like I'm white, I button it up 2, and no,
What?
Asians we only button it 1. And they're going back and forth. So is that like racism? Is that like are you allowed any jokes about our differences? Right? And then what's that boundary where, that student was like, we're Asians, we're not Vesians. Right? We get A's. You guys can have lower standards. We're expected to get A's. Right? And
Don't
like,
tell David that one. He's gonna be.
it's sort of in good fun. It's not like mean spirited, but it's like it's probably not conducive, and it can probably go off very, very quickly. So yeah,
My curiosity is if you would discipline a student for that, would you discipline a student who said, "Well, I'm so white, that's why I can't dance"?
yeah. It's a little bit of a gray area, right? Like you don't.
Like if you would discipline for one.
Right.
I feel like if it goes too far,
Classroom management
then it's
scenarios.
like you need to know the boundaries.
Yeah.
But if it's like your own race, making fun of it, it's kind of joking, and it passes really quick, I feel like I wouldn't like send them out. of the
Yeah.
classroom.
And I just, this is like a wisdom issue. Like you don't want no humor,
Mhm.
but what I work really hard is this jokes we can laugh with people, or is this joke we laugh at people? Right? That's a big difference. And too often boys will have jokes that they laugh at somebody versus like, oh, this is funny, we can laugh with people. So yeah, but it happens in our schools. We had the first grade teacher. She was going through an old history book, and it showed African Americans enslaved, and there was one African American in the class. It's like, oh, that's this person. And our first grade teacher was like, how do I navigate this without offending people? So that stuff it will come up. So that's a good one. All right, go ahead and nominate someone else with another scenario.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh. Caitlin, what'd you do to number 19?
You ask students to stand or recite the catechism, and 2 of them groan and roll their eyes. What do they do?
She didn't know anything about that.
We just start crying.
Hmm.
I think I would probably just say again, like I don't know if I'd say it right when they do that, or go a few and get to a good question. And then like after that question, be like, this is so important. Like we are meditating on this every day. And it's also like, we have fun exams, I think. We have fun exams. And that's because of the catechism. And it's like, you want a hard exam? I'll give you a hard exam, you know? Like, and then it's all of a sudden, like, you'll realize, like, the catechism is a beautiful thing that allows us to have enjoyable exams and open textbook, open book exams. So, yeah, I think I would just probably talk about that.
So would you correct the student in public, or would you take them outside the hall?
Yeah, if it's two students doing it, I would do it in class. And honestly, maybe even one student, just because it is such a group exercise, that I would assume that more than one person is feeling that way. I think if like there's other times where it's like I pass out something and someone groans or something, and then it's like, okay, that's complaining, or verbalizes something, like then that's a little bit different. But I think with the catechism, because it is such a group thing.
Yeah, and I would think because of this tends to be like a public performance sin, sort of like he's doing it to get a reaction. They're doing it to get a reaction, right? That would be probably a pretty appropriate. Like, no, we don't groan. This is good for us. We don't complain about things that are good for us. Your other students are enjoying this. Let's not ruin it for them. Something like really quick. Then if it's a habit, then you can take them out and talk to them about that. But it's also something you want to address. I would think that it's not hard to get this to become the norm or spread, right? And like, oh, I guess this is allowed, or oh, you're silently teaching them they are right to groan about this if we don't address it. And sometimes it's hard to remember that because like we're trying to get things done. But we've tried to put a real emphasis on that sort of complaining, disgruntled, things like, is this going to be on the test? Laying on your desk. We like to try to address that in that scenario. Okay, pick a scenario.
Oh. 11. Sayre. Do you have a student that does this? Because I have a student that does this.
Wow.
Really?
Really?
You guys don't have
Oh,
students?
I know who you're talking about.
No, these are completely hypothetical. I've never run
These
into
are
this.
hypothetical.
This is real.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I love the other service yeah, I probably would tell you the party.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that a little louder.
I probably would tell you the party.
Yeah. This one I would like to ask a lot of questions too. Like, what do you mean by punish?
Yeah.
Right? I get locked in a closet for that weekend if I don't get A's. So I'm like, okay, what's that mean? Or I'm not allowed to play 4 hours of Nintendo if I don't get A. You know what I mean? Like, well, maybe you shouldn't be getting to play video games. Like, there's punish can mean in a lot of different things. So I want some clarification. And we've seen, different things, and some people probably put too much emphasis on grades, and you might have to talk to the parent a little bit of like, hey, what's happening at home? We had a pretty minor thing, and she would mention this, she's having these consequences at home. Maybe you have to explain, this was a reading quiz just for a check for understanding of whether you read or not. And so maybe there's like a misunderstanding of what is being done. maybe the student is goofing off, staying up to 3 o'clock every night, could easily be getting A's, but they're not honoring their parents or their teachers. And so maybe something appropriate is happening at home. So that's another one where I would really like questions and then communication with parents. All right, go ahead and pick a scenario. And someone just answer.
Number 8, Ben.
Number 8, rumors. Lily tells you that another student was making fun of a teacher at a weekend get together. What do you do? Well, let's see.
Expel 'em.
Lily tells you that another student was making. I would, yes. Okay, so what I'm feeling like is talk to Lily, get her to give some more details. I want to, have her do the work of like, what are you talking about? Try to get as much as I can from her that's appropriate, not like, going to extra links, but get some of the context. It's just so easy, I think, sometimes in our zeal to like hear something and then just immediately act upon it, which is a part of your principle here of Proverbs 18:17 up top. I mean, it's like, okay, hang on, just like slow to judge, right? I think is I've learned to like, okay, slow down. Don't be reactive to people's hyper emotionalism, which is like almost always. So just like, let's slow down here. Like I'm not always perfect at it, of course, but when I'm on my A game, slow down, get context, and then I probably will go to that student and then have a clear conversation, with that other student. Is this true? Like, is this Lily trying to get the other one in trouble, or,
Right.
just like confirm, talk to the other, get it. Okay, what's this is what I'm hearing. And I might even not mention Lily's name. Like I might actually talk to their student and be like, hey, I had heard,
Right.
and just maybe try to, just go straight to that student, hold them accountable. And maybe there's more going on. Maybe that person didn't do it. And it might be helpful for them to not know that Lily said this, right? If Lily is actually the one like up to no good here. And then I'll just, do that kind of accountability and confrontation with that student who apparently had done that.
Thanks. Depending on the age of the student, here's another thing you might want to think about. Lily, did you talk to the other student about it? Right? Did you go and say, hey, you're making that jokes about the teacher? I didn't appreciate it. Have you talked to it? Or is it just running to authority? And they miss that opportunity of Christian fellowship and talking to each other. And then you have to decide, how much do you police outside of school? Right? Like that's a hard question. I don't know. I know the answer to it either. But like, I heard someone was smoking outside the school. I heard someone like I'm not the church. I'm not the parent. So you also have to think of like, I don't know where that boundary is, but like I can't police all the kids' lives. I know some of the kids have a kind of a dual life. They act one way in school and I say other words outside of school. And so I think we have to be careful of that boundary a little bit too. But also, things get brought into school. So it's not, it's a disrespect to a teacher. If it's happening outside of school, maybe it's going to be happening inside of school too. So maybe you do want to address that. But that's a hard one. And you'll have to think about one principle I think about with kids sinning. If I can't necessarily convict them or catch them, so to speak, in one incident, it's going to happen again if they really are sinning. Does that make sense? It's like, okay, he said, she said, there's something said about some teacher on the college. I can't make heads or tail. I can't tell who's telling me the truth and who's like making things up.
Right.
Well, if it is true, it's going to happen again. They think they're going to get away with it. I'll be on the lookout for it now, and I will have another opportunity to address it. So I think that's a comfort to me that I don't have to like bring every sin into account. Sometimes I'm like, okay, we know this is going on. I got my eyes locked on the student now. We will catch them in the next time they do this. And then I can say, I saw you take this, or I heard you say this. I don't know. For what it's worth, that might be a good strategy sometimes. Okay, pick a scenario.
Okay. Well, this might seem harsh, but I am going to angle this towards my beloved daughter. But it's not because I'm wanting to be harsh. It's just because I want to help. This the whole point of this week is to try to help get us ready. And Julie is going to be new to some of this stuff. So I think I'm going to choose 18, direct disobedience. You want me to read it out loud? You pass out papers face down and instruct students not to look at them until later. Corey picks up the paper and starts looking at it. What are you going to do?
Directly call her out. What did I say?
Right.
And if she's like, oh, I'm gonna be like, let's try that again. And then I either repass out papers or maybe just like, and then if she does it again, then I'm gonna send her out. I would directly call her out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and you can do that in a pretty lighthearted way. Of like, did you just hear what I said? I'm pretty sure I just said, like, I try to have a
Yeah.
not like how dare you, but also like,
Yes.
okay, I'm pretty sure I just said don't do that. Did you hear that? I'm like, yeah. Or you'll be like, I don't care what you said. You'll either pick up on the visual cues of
Right.
that. But yeah, you don't want to gloss over it. I think you want to address it. And I mean, they're kids and we're people. We mess up. I don't do everything I'm asked to do all the time. But yeah, I think you're right on. You just address it. Okay, pick a scenario.
Mr. Martin, what did you do?
I think to me, there's a huge difference in this one if it's a boy or a girl.
Can you give me the number again one more time?
12.
What?
So, 12?
12,
Okay,
hygiene,
great.
the hygiene one. I would address it really differently if it's a boy or a girl. The urine is kind of odd. That would be unusual regardless, boy or girl. The body odor, I've had that for both boys and girls. And if it's a girl, I would probably wait till there was like private time and just we have some girls who are like raised by a single dad or something that just might not be hearing that.
Yeah.
And so I just try to address it in like a way I would as a mom.
Right.
Depending on the boy, I might call it out and have fun with it. Because usually their friends are already doing it. It's not a secret. They're like, dude, why'd you ever wear deodorant? Like they're already usually doing that. And that, yes, as the mom of several teenage sons, it often is great positive peer pressure for boys to just have more people. I usually, what I always tell my own sons is, please wear deodorant because I want grandchildren. I'm not going to get them if you don't wear it.
Yes.
Yeah. But isn't this funny? Like, this is something you have to teach kids. I never thought I would be the one having the conversation of deodorant. But
urine is a little, I mean, unless it was an elementary kid, I mean, that would make sense. But if it's an older kid,
yeah, it's good to notice a yellow flag like that.
yeah, that might
Right?
be a
Like,
sign
what
of
is
something.
that? And like, so you have to like, so, okay, there's a couple levels to this. So we tend to generally try to have like a private conversation, take them aside, especially with the girls. Even with the boys, you got to be careful because it can turn a little bit like, everybody feels like they're having fun, but really one kid is getting the brunt of it, and he may act like he enjoys it and not inside. So I'd be careful with that too. But we've had all sorts of experiences with that. Like some, we had ultimate frisbee become really popular at our school, and some of the teachers letting them do it on the passing period for like 10 minutes. And then, oh my gosh, the 7th and 8th boys would come back in, and that class was reeked.
Yes.
Like, and it's not. They probably were wearing deodorant, but they were also playing ultimate frisbee on a hot day. Thanks a lot, teacher. So you just got to crank the windows, right?
All middle school teachers should have
Yeah.
Febreze.
Sometimes deodorant or like a smell of urine might be a sign of neglect, right? And it's like, okay, what's happening today? You might pull aside, or we've had neurodivergent kids, and just different. They weren't equipped with skills that other students would have, so you've had to help them through things like that. My favorite is last year we had a 5th grader girl decide to use her mom's perfume. And I'm pretty sure all of the perfume. Like, it was so overpowering that the teacher came up and talked to me about, like, what do I do about this? And I kind of thought she was being a little sensitive. I'm like, oh, you probably just have a sensitive nose. I don't really, this is probably not that bad. I'll go down and check on it. I was like, okay, this is really bad.
Wow.
So they actually moved classrooms or like opened the windows. And then you had to have a talk with the mom. I don't know how the kid got from home to the school with this like overpowering perfume smell. So you look out for the well-being of the child, of kindness, of like everybody knows, but you're not going to like spotlight it. She just made a probably honest mistake using it before. But boy, we had to do a lot of stuff like crank the windows and move the classroom around a little bit because it was just overpowering.
Sometimes too, they'd sneak it if they knew they weren't supposed to have it.
Yeah,
They
right.
would school and put it on in the bathroom before
Yeah.
class.
And sometimes like kids do things and the parents can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like
Like they just don't have control of their kids.
yeah, well, they don't have control of kids, or like sometimes it's like it's a good example of this, but like your kid wears like his brother's pants and it's like up to here, but you don't notice it till you get to school and you're like, well, we're just gonna live with that. Like, or maybe the parent has an opportunity to go
I
home
had a
and get a change of
16-year-old
clothes.
16-year-old boy who was wearing his kindergarten brother's collared shirt to school.
Yeah.
He was too lazy to find his own size.
Yeah.
He was doing biology lab and he leans over to write an answer, and I'm like, whoa, never seen a boy's midriff before. Is that your little brother's shirt? He's like, no, it's mine. It's mine. And then his buddy looks at it. It's like,
Yeah.
size 5? What?
And
Wow.
like that's not bad parenting or like
Just having 5 kids. And not
yeah, it's I know, it's like we do our best. So having a little mercy for parents of like, I can't believe my kid did that. It's good. Okay, so pick a scenario and
Caitlin, 13.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Recommending Game of Thrones. Oh, I missed that. I think that'd be such a fun way to start class. Be like, whoa! But the thing is sometimes, like, someone will say, oh, I watched this movie, and I'm like, yeah, that's not a good movie. And then it's like, wait, what movie was it? Like, everyone else is like, they heard me say it's not good. And then all of a sudden it's like they want to watch that movie. So I don't know if that would be great. But yeah. So I don't know. But it could be fun to be like, oh, this just go off. But I think also it could be, yeah, just like maybe recommending other historical shows. Fantasy, like the medieval world shows that aren't soft porn. I don't know. I don't know, actually. Yeah.
yeah. What did your school think about Harry Potter?
I mean, most of our kids have read the books
Yeah.
and
So,
love it.
Do you have anybody who doesn't like Harry Potter and thinks it's like
Not anyone that thinks.
You mean like wait? So
Like-
do you mean like people who are anti-fantasy?
yeah,
Is that what you mean?
a little bit. It can be
Mm.
that, or it can just be like the witchcraft in Harry Potter, or yeah.
Not as much, really.
No, okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So we do run across some people are like Harry Potter. No Christian should read that.
Mm-hmm.
Not very much anymore. Like, but I'll get a few like that every once in a while. But so there's something like that, like Harry Potter. Like Christians can have different opinions on how good Harry Potter is, and that's that's very like house rules, right?
Right.
Something like Game of Thrones is probably a lot more objectively bad.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be putting that before your students. You probably don't want your other students finding that on their own. I think that one, I wouldn't like draw a line on Harry Potter, like,
Right.
but I would probably speak into Game of Thrones. It's
Yeah.
like, I heard that show has a lot of gratuitous things that are not edifying. It doesn't lead me to Christ.
Hmm.
I don't know if I would be recommending that. I'd also send a message to the parent.
Oh, that's good.
And so I'd like, hey, just so you know, Johnny was recommending this to other classes. I said that, that's probably not what we're going to pursue here in the classroom. And just like leave it as that because you don't want to speak into a family's,
Yeah.
because it gives them time to like, well, I said it was okay, and how dare
Yeah.
you judge me? But for the parent that does want to know, maybe it was an accident. Like maybe that parent doesn't know their kid is watching Games of Thrones,
Right.
and you just help them out. So I try to very neutrally just say, hey, I talked about this, and you have your own classroom culture and rules. So it's completely okay to say, we're not gonna talk about 50 Shades of Grey in our classroom or whatever thing that comes up. So that's kind of like another wisdom issue. And you guys can kind of decide where you are on certain things of whether you want to say what's virtuous for your students or not.
Something that I think is kind of makes me think of too, 13, is that. So I actually think, for us who work with youth, like this is actually a pretty important argument for actually knowing and understanding trends in pop culture. Like I think you know what I'm saying? Like I think sometimes, like us older generation a little bit down the road, we can just be like, we see the shallowness, of like, we are, I'm sorry, yeah, it is true.
Sorry.
We're from the late 1900s.
Yeah, just like I think, well, most of us, I think, we look back and we can see, oh, it's so stupid. And like the kids can't see it. Like we had all the same things when you were age. It's just this common teenage thing of like, oh, this is the new greatest thing. And we see through that and we can just kind of write it all off. And I'm not saying we need to like respect and appreciate it. I'm saying there's an argument here for actually, we should actually probably do some studying and know like what's actually going on to some degree of detail, because if we don't, and you hear some terrible thing that some student is recommending and gloating over, but we have no idea about we don't know anything about it. And we're just out of touch, see?
That reminds me of a situation we had in school and a missed opportunity. And so one of the students that was a little bit more worldly, maybe not the strongest Christian family, she came up to her teacher talking about, I can't remember, some Netflix show about kids with like suicide in it. She's like, all my friends are watching this. I think this is good. And the teacher got kind of scared of the topic and was like, you need to talk to your parents about that. And then just that's that, which sounds right on a one surface level, but what it really was probably a cry of help from that kid wanting to know right and wrong, like wanting someone to like, all my kids are doing it, friends are doing this, is this good? She knew enough to ask, but the teacher didn't take the time to say, oh yeah, that's really interesting. What is that? Why are all your friends watching it? Like a 5-minute conversation could help set that student versus like the brush off, which is sort of right. Like I'm not going to have a deep conversation with a student about Game of Thrones as a parent would. Does that make sense? Like I am going to transfer that over to the parent, but I'm not going to brush the kid off because they're not going to bring the next thing to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like a cry for help.
Mm-hmm.
So just be on the look of that. You do have an opportunity to speak wisdom and truth of Christ in the kids' lives, but also know you're just a teacher, not a pastor. So
I do in the 7th and 8th grade science, we do like the reproduction talk.
Yeah.
We separate them into boys and girls. And I had one group of girls that one time started sharing shows they had seen. You never know where the conversation's going to go.
Right.
And kind of what you're talking about, Ben, but also just like what kids today are exposed to is so off the charts.
Yeah.
We could have even possibly
Yeah.
been exposed to.
Yeah.
Right.
Like when we were kids, you had to go to like a porn shop and
Right.
actually you'd
Yeah.
get kicked out if you were 12.
Yeah.
Right.
If these are kids, you can access stuff on YouTube. I don't
Yeah.
want to know. I don't want to know details of this stuff.
Yeah.
And she started describing this show that was just, I don't even want to go into it, but it was off the charts. Like what I just blew my mind that a 12-year-old was watching this.
Wow.
She thought it was funny. She has some older siblings who have friends in public school, and I was supposed to be that way. And I dealt with it in class by just saying like that, and there was positive peer pressure too. Some of the kids were like, "You watch that? Like, I
Yeah.
turned the ads off for that thing, and you should." So there was positive peer pressure, and I just said, "I agree. Like, this is not something you should watch." But I did call the parent and let them know about just like, "Hey, just so you know, this is a show your daughter says she's watched on YouTube," and yeah, the parent kind of was like, "Well, I don't allow YouTube in my house, so there's no way that's possible."
Yeah.
It was just like, that's what I got, but I felt like morally bound. Like I have
Yeah.
to tell the parents that
And in
your kid's
situations,
been exposed. to
yeah, I like that. And I think you should be very content knowing that you did your responsibility,
Mhm.
right? You can't unfortunately be the parent. And so I talk to my teachers of having a certain amount of armor between yourself and the students because you have those situations that are heartbreaking, right? It's like, I wish this parent took this seriously or wasn't defensive. And maybe they'll defensive to you and they'll actually address it as further down the line. But you do have to have a certain amount of armor between yourself and the students because you don't get to be Christ to them. You don't get to save them when I say that. Yeah. So that's the hard part of this job. No doubt about that.
Something too that's kind of connected, but sometimes like we'll kind of go near a topic of like drugs or like suicide or like something in a book or something weird goes on or somehow it comes up in a discussion. And so, definitely I don't do this all the time, but I definitely do try and lean in to those conversations. Like when it is like, oh, someone wants to talk about drugs and it's like, okay, yeah, like these things, there's never like a good, and just going into a little bit because it's like they're not going to ask most of the time and they're not going to talk to their parents about it. And it's kind of like, this could be the only time we talk about it.
Yeah.
So definitely like, and so maybe it's not, but then too, it's like they're here. And then it's like when they see it on the TV show, they know like, oh, that's never good, and I don't know, kind of going into that stuff.
In the Count of Monte Cristo, there's a storyline with suicide in it. Rose talks about talking into that moment and teaching about it, right? And the kids noticed it and they wanted to talk about it. So it's important to talk about it.
Yeah.
There's like a hinted at lesbian relationship that the kids didn't get at all.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like Rose felt compelled to like, oh, I'm going to bring that out and bring that up into it. And since they didn't see it, they weren't ready for it in the sense of you can use wisdom and you have to be like the lead of what is appropriate for your teachers to get into these sort of conversations. But we're supposed to be having those conversations and pursuing wisdom and knowledge. It'd be weird if because what happens for our school is we start reading the Old Testament in 7th grade, cover to cover, and everything's in the Old Testament, right? Like everything's in the Old Testament. And some parents will be like, do I have to teach my kid what a prostitute is? And we're like, yes, it's in the Bible. We're not going to have that conversation necessarily of like the birds and the bees, but you need to do that because we're teaching what the Bible says. And so it would be terrible to avoid that and not teach what the Bible says because we're too afraid to talk about what a prostitute is, right? And it'll get awkward and funny in class. And everybody is like, do you know what this is? And everybody's like, yeah, yeah. And one kid will be like, no, I don't know what it is. And I'm like, ah. And you'll have to explain things, but there's an appropriateness level to doing that. Not all parents will appreciate that. And I'm not saying like, go teach the birds and the bees to the kids, but
That's all you.
but like we're gonna read, the Greeks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you have to equip them to do that. Because
Totally.
I guess for our school, we say we are equipping them to witness to the world. We're equipping them for the world. We're not hiding them from the world, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know where the boundaries are. Like that's a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty open here to address a lot of things, and that's how I want it to be. But yes, you're right. It does take wisdom, and it's like you said before, we have to teach kids everything. You said, and it's because churches aren't as thorough as they need to be often, and then families are not. You want families having super open, real, and some of the families do, but
Yeah.
some of the families don't. So it's actually good, I think, to in appropriate ways, kind of like the example of the Count of Monte Cristo. Like it's actually good to talk about super hot, sensitive stuff sometimes, but really carefully because they're getting all kinds of scandalous stuff shoved at them all the time. So it's like we know that's going on. So why don't we take the high ground and actually talk about this stuff and then give them categories, right, to like navigate it. That's the goal.
And we get the opportunity. This is what the Bible says about it. This is what.
Yeah.
That is confusing. Let's turn to Scripture. And so those are opportunities. That's one of the most enjoyable parts of being a secondary teacher is like they can think, right? Like they have questions.
Yeah.
Oh, I can ask someone else. Or are we done?
Yeah. Anybody got? We're wrapping up pretty closely, so pick some good ones. Anyone got like a burning one that they?
I want to talk about
What you got?
one. Oh, number 6. For anybody.
6?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I was looking at that too.
No, let's do an easier one. No. Who would you like to answer?
Anybody who.
We can just talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like immediately I would be like, talk about gossiping with her and be like, listen, this is not something that you talk about, and then it's like that, like I would deal with that in that moment.
What is it? Gossip? I mean, if she thinks her friend needs help, it's not, if it's slander, if it's not true, it's gossip. But she might be trying to get her friend.
Like if
help.
she, yeah,
But
but
it's
it's,
how they approach you.
yeah,
I'm wondering what to do about this.
I guess, okay, yeah, I guess I kind of took it as like, oh, did you hear
Yeah.
Glinda?
Right. One of the problems is we have Jill tells you that Bonnie told her that.
Right.
But I would I would probably go to the eyewitness first
Yeah.
and find out, did you see her or did she just tell you or did, find out more details. Know what Bonnie actually saw or didn't see before I do anything about it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good starting point. So one of my principles that I try to always remember is I do not discount anything a student tells me, and I don't have to believe everything a student tells me.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps me in the boundaries of like, I don't be like, oh, that would never happen at our school, right? And it's also not be like, oh yeah, I know for sure this is happening because a kid told me this was happening, right? So I keep those boundaries. I don't believe everything I hear, and I don't discount anything I hear. And then the other joke is, as parents, like, I'll tell parents, we won't believe everything the kid says about you if you promise not to believe everything the kid says about us, right? Because, they're not always the best translators of information, the most honest of conduits. But yeah, so there's definitely like throwing up in the bathroom is a deal. You can't gloss over that, and like can't ignore that because that could be a serious red flag. It could be the flu, right? So yeah, I would kind of follow that chain of like, did you see this? And it helps kids. I mean, I've had situations where a kid says, I think this is happening to another kid because that kid did not want to bring anything up to us. and then I had to go down this whole chain. But we don't want to leave our kids in the lurch. One of the greatest things is when you can bring light into the darkness, right? Either there's a sin situation going on and nobody wants to deal with it, but if you bring light into that situation, ultimately you get to a great outcome, which you need. Yeah. So, it's been slow. Like, I don't immediately like, oh no, she's throwing up in the bathroom. That's like, what is it called? Anorexia. Like, I don't have to immediately jump to that concern, but I wouldn't rule out that concern, right? Yeah, I don't know that. And then I think you are also right in that, like, we don't want all the kids talking about this, out on the playground, out like at lunch. So I'd say, hey, thank you for bringing that to me. I want you to be really generous to your friend and not talk about this to everybody. It's going to be embarrassing to her. But thank you so much for bringing it to me, which was
Yeah, that's a good point.
too. So you kind of set that, like, I can squash any rumors necessarily, or do my best. Gossip is the hardest thing for me to conceptualize. What is appropriate talking about other people and what is gossip? And I've always struggled with that because, like, think of the teacher lounge. We need to be able to talk about students together, but not gossip about students.
Yeah.
And I want a pastor to completely make it clear in my mind, because people talk about other people, and sometimes it's very necessary. Like, hey, I have Johnny struggling with this. Have you ever had success with a student that has this? And you're like, hey, have you tried this and stuff like this? First is like, can you believe Johnny? Like, that kid, I am gonna pull out my hair. I don't know what to do. It's like, oh yeah, I heard this about their family, right? Like, so.
The rule of thumb in my mind is, if I had a pastor's wife tell me once that if you're telling somebody that can do something about it, you're not gossiping.
Yeah.
So if she's coming to you because she's worried about her friend, she's trying to do something about it.
Right.
But if it's kid trying to get someone else in trouble, or if it's like teachers, like, what did you do when you have a kid in this situation?
Yeah.
There's someone that can do something about it.
I was shooting a story about. Oh, I think I'm like. I think.
69.
Oh yeah, I'm 9 minutes over.
Tell us your story quick.
I had a PDA outbreak at school, so I
Oh
was
yeah.
working with 2
Oh,
students about
yes.
PDA, but there was a third student, right? A third student who used to like one of the students, but she's also like a rule follower and like, oh, they're doing PDA, and she wanted to tell on them doing PDA. It was not innocent, like, oh, I'm just looking out for the good of the school.
Right.
Right? There was more to it. So that student had to be told, like, actually, right now they're outside of school. That's on their parents. I know it's the end of a school event, but it's like okay, I appreciate it, but we're on it. You don't need to let me know about this anymore because it wasn't innocent. And then, yeah. So you get complicated.
Get through 20 scenarios?
Yeah. I'm doing what I told him not to do and do not punctual. There's too many good stories.
Yep.
Students miss it. No.
Can we grab some coffee real quick? Is that
We
okay?
should take a 10-minute break.
I'm
for you
sorry.
guys.
Babies on the left.
Go for it.
I don't think I
like them. I like them.
I know, but
What was your favorite scenario?
Oh. The
Our
ones that were
favorite?
Real.
what is on the
The big